Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm here with Lisa Moneymaker, and we're really excited to be talking to you about our approach to decentralized trials at Medidata. And I know maybe just to kick it off, Lisa, I know that we have seen a huge amount of change in the last year due to COVID. And I know at Medidata, all the different product teams have been using this as an opportunity to really innovate and develop some new approaches to the way we do research and thinking, in the patient cloud team anyway, about building better products for patients to participate, especially during a pandemic. But even during normal times, it can be quite complex to find the best way to capture data outside of a site setting from patients directly. So, and some of the timelines that we've seen in the last year have been just unbelievable. Drugs going to market, in a tenth of the time that it would normally take to get through a full development life cycle for some of these products. Decentralization has emerged as one of the big kind of, I think, forward-looking topics or themes that came out of COVID, but that is really driving a lot of the way we think about developing software and the way our industry thinks about utilizing software throughout the clinical trials process. But I think another thing that's happened here that I'm hoping you can talk about a little bit here today is that many of the folks who are focused on decentralized trials think that most of decentralization is about patients. And although it is about patients, and we're going to get to that a little bit later in some of the demos that we're going to show, there's a really important patient aspect and patient choice aspect that we're trying to get to in the way we develop software. But at Medidata, I know we've defined decentralized trials as a lot more than just the patient-facing interfaces. And we've really tried to extend the definition of decentralization into all of our products and thinking about all the different ways that we can take functionality and operational oversight outside of just the pure brick and mortar site setting wherever we can. So I know many of those products fall in your group at Medidata. So maybe can you describe a little bit of what's going on in that part of the business?
Yeah, thanks so much, Anthony. No, it's such a great point in the sense that when we have thought traditionally about decentralization, it's been about that patient experience. But what we've been looking at, especially in the last 18 months or so, but really even before then in preparation, and this was more like a catalyst as opposed to a change in strategy, was this idea that as the new shape and form of data really changes, that we move from sort of those traditional source to transcription types of data to more e-source, more patient-centric data, you've got to have the ability to get closer to it. You have to have the ability to respond to it, to see it, to have oversight of it as it's happening. And that what lets us get really strategic about the way we can react to it, the way that we can have oversight of site performance, of how the protocol is doing, of how the study is progressing, and really how the patients are doing in response to that. Medidata is obviously proudly a data first company and a data forward company. And so we've been investing for quite some time in ways to make sense of all of these sorts of data. And in my space, in the clinical operations space, it's really critical that we use that data to transform, again, the way that we can bring those strategies together. And so as COVID really changed the way that monitors could truly interact with sites, that, like I said, became this catalyst to companies coming to us saying, how can you help us with this? And we obviously saw that companies who already had a centralized monitoring strategy were faring better, who didn't need to rely so much on CRAs going and physically touching and seeing that data, who are able to say, we can take a step back and do that remotely. And I think the real benefit to that is that lets us see this higher velocity data when we bring in wearables and we're bringing in sensors and things like that, be able to make sense of it and make sense of it in a way that lets us assure that patient safety. And what I really think we're seeing in this decentralization space is this kind of change in what it means to have control of that study and to have monitoring be truly empowered. Now, whether that's a central monitor or whether that's a study lead or whether that's a traditional CRA, empowerment of those users is what lets us go from just really operational metrics to how can they have more control of that clinical data and see the trends and see what's actually coming in. Again, and we could do that because we can get them a lot closer to it now. They can understand better what they're looking for, have really clean strategies up front about what matters and the critical to quality factors. And then what am I going to do about it when I start to see things happen that may affect trial, like I said, efficacy or patient safety. And I think that that empowerment piece is what's really key and what I hope folks are going to see today when we bring this really tangible. And I love, from an empowerment perspective, what you were saying about some of those patient centricity pieces, this idea that we're putting more control and empowerment in the hands of sort of different actors maybe than before. So I know that ties in the patient centricity piece, which has been really huge and such a driving force for you and your teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think empowerment's a good word. We also, on the patient cloud team, we think about it a lot in terms of choice. And there's a lot of different players in the process of building and designing and executing a clinical trial. But I think if we always, from a software standpoint, just keep choice in mind, we want to empower all of our users across that spectrum, including patients, to be able to make certain choices. So you might have the choice of going to a site visit physically or participating remotely in a video site visit. You might have the choice of a monitoring trip to the site or a virtual monitoring trip. You might have the choice to design a protocol to use sensors to get more quantitative data, or to use more instruments and ePro forms to get more qualitative data. So we've developed at Medidata this idea that we call the trial dial, which essentially is just a way to imagine that you're dialing up or down the amount of decentralization that you might find appropriate for that study. And you could imagine lots of different trial dials. Maybe there's one for the monitors, one for the sensors, one for the ePro forms, one for the site visits versus home visits, and so forth. And I think if we could get to the point, and this is really what we're shooting for in our software development roadmaps, get to the point where all the different aspects of data capture or data oversight on any study could sort of be dialed from fully centralized at a site visit to fully decentralized in the patient's home, and provide that kind of empowerment and choice that we want to be giving all of our users. So as we jump into this demo, what we're going to see is the patients authenticating in My Medidata with their username, password, and they hit a screen that tells them that they've got a form to complete today. They click on that form, they get started with their physical assessment. In this case, we've got some radio button, multiple choice answers, a date field, about the last dose of medication. They're going to fill out an anxiety VAS scale. And then here in the Wong-Baker FACES scale, they're actually choosing a score of 10, which will get in the demo later, and we'll explain that. Lastly, another example of a VAS for overall health score, and a couple of check all apply fields for anatomical sites, and then an open text field for number of hours they slept last night. So at this point, the patient gets a review screen. They can kind of see and go back and edit any answers that they're not happy with before this data gets submitted into My Medidata. And if they continue at the bottom, then get a quick thank you screen. They could go to the next form, view other activities, go to their home site. Lots of different navigational opportunities here within My Medidata. And again, on the site side of all of this, because the data are shared immediately with Rave, you're able to, as a clinician or a clinician team, see these same data fields filled out in a Rave form. Again, here you can see the physical function assessment for this date for this patient and all the scores that the patient provided. What this particular physician is going to flag is that 10, that rating of 10 on the pain scale. And the demo that we're showing here is the capability that the physician then has to go in and generate pretty much an immediate My Medidata Live video visit with that patient to be able to discuss this score. So here you're seeing them schedule the date and time. Again, all this scheduling is taking place within the context of the Rave interface that the site is using generally for the study. So they've logged into Rave, they've descended to this patient on their study in Rave, and they're setting up a video visit engagement time for the patient. And you can see here, the reason they're flagging is, concern about the pain level that we saw the patient enter on that form. So as soon as this visit gets scheduled, you can kind of bounce back to the patient side and see that they receive an email. The email just confirms the upcoming video visit, but it also gives them a quick link straight into the My Medidata interface where, again, the patient authenticates, sees the visit, on their schedule, on their dashboard, can click the join visit button, and immediately the video visit launches. So here's the patient ready to join the visit, waiting for the clinician to show up. There's the clinician. They can have their conversation about that score or anything else that's concerning in the patient chart. And on the clinician side of the interface, notes are captured from this talk that they're having over the video. And these notes can be saved, reviewed by monitors, added to the audit trail within Rave, and so on. So, hopefully this helps show some of the nice integration points within the platform. Again, patients using my Medidata and the site using their normal Rave database and the Rave platform suite of tools to engage with patients on decentralized trials as frequently as possible.
It's fantastic that we have these patient-centric technologies, which allow patient participation from anywhere to provide the best possible patient experience and to provide even more useful data for the clinical trial. But how do we manage all that data being collected as part of a decentralized trial? How do we ensure it's of high quality and integrity? Traditional models of verifying all data break down when there's nothing to verify it against, as is the case for eSource data. What we're going to show you today is how you can use risk-based strategies embedded with deep analytics for continuous monitoring of all study data to surface anomalies for further investigation and remediation, all on a single data platform without navigating between siloed data sources or different logins to different systems and without waiting for data to be transferred. So the first step is identifying those data and processes that are critical to study success via a risk management plan, and then those will fundamentally drive how we set up our monitoring strategies. So if we use an example from a rheumatoid arthritis study, we know that the primary efficacy endpoint and critical data are VAS scores, and an associated critical process would be the collection of these scores by the patient and the clinician. So now that we've identified what's known as critical to quality factors, we can set up the risks associated with those data and processes. And what's powerful here is our ability to adjust and modify these as we learn more over time. Risk teams can leverage previous knowledge from historical studies, and then we can adjust the risks as we go. So here we've identified the risks of inconsistency of pain evaluation between subject and physicians from the VAS data. And this was identified by the risk teams from previous studies. So we're getting that rich contextual information informing how we execute future studies. So we can score the risk on a number of different dimensions. But here's where we come back to the power of the single data platform. That risk is not useful unless I can drive mitigation strategies around it. And so I can set up how I want to control for this risk, what data I'm going to focus on. And when we're talking about high volume, high velocity patient data capture, I can't just be looking at one patient or even one site's data. I need to leverage the capabilities available to analyze data across the entire study's data set to be able to identify those trends and anomalies in near real time. And I need to be able to coordinate cross-functional stakeholders who might have a stake in that risk mitigation, whether it's a central monitor or an on-site CRA. We need to coordinate all these capabilities seamlessly in a way that maximizes how we use the data and shortens the time between the discovery of a potential risk and our ability to take action on it. So you can see in all these different areas coming together in a single view, we're connecting technology, stakeholders, and workflows so that we can have a holistic view of risk. So in this case, previous studies demonstrated a discordance variation between participant and clinical VAS reports. So as a result, within risk management, a risk control mechanism was to perform a discordance review between the participant and the clinical VAS reporting. So within that same system, with a click, I'm now in my central monitoring hub. I've moved seamlessly from planning how I'm going to manage my risks and set up my monitoring strategies into seamlessly executing on those strategies. So now we can do data quality reviews based on the prescribed risk mitigation strategies established within risk management, taking some of the guesswork out of how are we going to perform central monitoring. In this case, we can look for discordance in the VAS scores across the entire study using an event incidence plot or via an error plot, where I can focus on just the data I want to look at. In this case, patient versus physician reporting of VAS scores. I can look for outliers across the entire study data set, or I can focus on just those regions with higher outliers for that critical data, indicating a disagreement in those scales, which could indicate issues of training. These could absolutely impact the efficacy of the data in clinical decision making. I now have the opportunity to direct targeted actions by raising an issue that supports effective communication between the central monitor and that site level or country level CRA who may need to be investigating that issue. And then the CRA, again, in the same environment, has access to a powerful dashboard to drive their on-site monitoring and data verification activities, informed by the risks we already set up and identified in risk management, and surfacing those issues that a central monitor may have uncovered during their data analysis, which again was informed by that same risk plan which identified the critical to quality factors. So now I can take action via a CTMS that connects and surfaces this data in one place and maximizes the amount of useful information to the CRA so that they can have more effective interactions with the sites, whether that's happening on-site or remotely.
So, hey, Lisa. Yeah, I mean, I think those demos are great for a couple different reasons. I mean, first of all, they really showcase how doing all of these things together in a single platform can speed up the kind of time delays that you might see between these different signals, right? So we saw a patient filling out a form. There's a problem with that form. They immediately go into a live visit. That live visit turns into, some other data value being entered. You can imagine that that could bring a safety signal into view much faster in concert, all those tools in concert than you might otherwise see them. So I think this is a really good example. And the other thing that I think is really cool about the demos and the approach that we're taking here is that stuff actually happened through a lot of our COVID studies that we ran at Medidata. These huge mega trials that were obviously happening in record time, but also very primarily focused on getting quick safety signals because everyone's just looking for the fastest route to approval of the vaccines. And a lot of the examples that you're looking at in these demos are real life examples from real life studies that have just happened in the last year and really showcase probably one of the most important use case examples that we've seen in the last decade for how important it is to very quickly see the data come in on a trial.
Yeah, that's a perfect point. It's like when we look at this and we have that proximity to the data and we can make sense of it, we can see that the sorts of advanced analytics power smarter, safer trials. We are able to react better. We are able to move from those insights to action, like we showed you, when we're defining better controls up front and understanding what we're looking at, and then we can really dive in and make sense of that data, and we can actually transfer that to, again, bringing that to an action that we need to take, all because we've brought it together in a way that really makes sense. I think that shows the power of how we provide a comprehensive solution to this. And that's really what we need in the sorts of trials that we're talking about, is a comprehensive approach that lets you address and show control and bring it all together, all the way from planning through to the impact to the patient at the end. And I think that's been the really most critical and exciting part of all of this. So I'm glad that we got together again, Anthony, to do this today, and glad that everyone could join us. Hope we get to see you all in person soon.